Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre with TeddyBaldassarre.com, and in this video we're looking at a watch from Certina with the DS Super PH500M. So in this video and on this channel, we cover watches available for purchase on our website, TeddyBaldassarre.com, as a full authorized dealer. So in this video, deep dive in this timepiece, final points of consideration at the end, but also throughout the video, if you have further questions or are looking to buy the watch, a link will be in the description down below to the product page. But guys, let's jump into the video, take a closer look at this watch. Although some might not be familiar with this Swiss brand Certina, they have deep roots in watchmaking dating back to 1888. And although there is not one precise point in which the brand established itself as one to be reckoned with in the world of Swiss watches, you probably could look at their innovations, including their revered DS concept, a shock-absorbing ring that encapsulated the movement, preventing impact among other taxing conditions from interrupting optimal timekeeping, and producing a crown system with a proprietary approach for watertight sealing that helped cement Certina as a serious tool watchmaker and an early trailblazer in influencing an emerging dive watch market. Though the brand gained some popularity for its use on an expedition of Everest and an introduction of the first watch to display biorhythms, the DS family of watches is most closely associated with life underwater, thanks to its use in the US Navy's Sea Lab 2 experiment and the DS2 Super PH500M being utilized in the US government's Tektite underwater habitat trials in 1969 and 1970. Today we're going to be looking at the Certina DS Super PH500M, a faithful and modern interpretation of those watches with ties to the VDST, one of the world's oldest non-profit diving associations. With vintage inspiration from legitimate dive history, connection to a prestigious and well-established diving association, ISO 6425 certification, 500 meters of water resistance, and that DS system, this watch has a lot to offer for its price point under $1,000. Looking closer at the wearing experience, despite the case diameter of 43 millimeters and thickness of 14.95 millimeters, the restrained lug-to-lug measurement of 48.1 millimeters allows for what would typically be a watch better suited for larger wrists to fit much more of a wider variety of wrist sizes. This watch tends to have almost a Seiko turtle-like effect if you've ever worn one of those watches, wearing much smaller than the case size is going to indicate. And I would say only the thickness is going to be out of the norm, and that is coming also with 500 meters of water resistance, so there is a reason that it is going to get that metric. And we'll talk a bit more about the case architecture and how this crystal sits, so a lot of that thickness is not actually felt in wear. Set between the very popular size 20 millimeter lugs is a rubber diver strap with a wave extension meant to stretch over a wetsuit or dry suit, then take up the slack at depth, ensuring a snug fit throughout the duration of a dive. The strap is long with a textured underside, helping to expunge water from the wrist, and terminates at a Certina signed, partially polished steel pin buckle. The case finishing is relatively straightforward, being entirely polished with a vertical side until curving back to meet the case back. Like its vintage predecessor, the PH500M makes use of a push-to-turn 60-click bezel with black aluminum insert and a lume pip at 12 that, although it does require more effort to operate, will offer the benefit of being a lot harder to accidentally rotate, a feature that was a matter of life and death back in the day when it was initially created. A screw-down crown at 3 o'clock pairs with a screw-down case back, helping this watch achieve a very impressive 500 meters of water resistance, providing reason and connection for its PH500M name. Further adding to peace of mind with this dive watch is that it comes with an ISO 6425 certification, a process where a watch must pass a litany of tests to ensure that a watch is capable enough to be a diving companion. Sitting proud at the bezel is a 14-sided steel extension of the case that surrounds the dial, both adding dimension and visual appeal to the watch while paying homage to the original design where this shape was in fact a screw-down lock ring, helping to hold the crystal down to the case. This is certainly going to contribute to the thickness of the watch, but as I mentioned, this is more perceived as part of the crystal than it is part of the case, so you are not really feeling this on wrist, so don't be too scared when you hear about that thickness that we were describing at just under 15 millimeters. It does not wear anywhere near that on wrist. Thanks to several layers of anti-reflective coating, layers to the underside of the flat sapphire crystal, there is limited glare and virtually no distortion position to hinder what is a very legible dial. Now, a vibrant orange dial was selected due to its enhanced legibility underwater and offers a semi-gloss finish paired with rectangular hour indices. A printed black crosshair adds interest to the dial and does well to visually connect the dial text to a printed frame date window at 3 o'clock. At center, we have black sword hands filled with the same bright superluminova as the hour indices and a lume pip on the bezel. Dial text is relatively simple and straightforward. You have DS Super PH500M at the bottom of the dial and Certina automatic with the Certina logo raised above that writing. One other point about this dial as well is how deeply seated it is within the dial because of that raised 14-sided aspect of the centralized case, adding as a further differentiator from a dial that is already unique in its own. Turning the watch over, you will see the case back celebrating the Certina VDST partnership by adding the VDST Diver Association logo at the center. Being part of the Swatch Group has its perks, and Certina has opted to once again utilize an exclusive and reliable caliber with the 80.611. This movement has a very impressive 80 hours of power reserve, which achieved by slowing down the beat rate of 4 Hz, 28,800 vibrations per hour to 3 Hz, 21,600 vibrations per hour, while also reworking aspects of the gear train to allow that longer reserve. The balance assembly is also modified for more of a free-sprung balance architecture and is fine-tuned and regulated at the factory, while also featuring a non-metallic Nivacron balance spring, reducing the negative effects of magnetism on the movement. A couple of key features about Certina, if you're looking at kind of differentiating them from some of the competition, even within the Swatch Group assembly of brands and where they sit within the hierarchy, is really how they are more approached to the tool aesthetic and delivering a lot of value for dollar. One is also the use of the movements here. So this is the .611, which is going to be a higher grade of that Powermatic 80 family of calibers. They use this as a bare minimum. They're doing a lot of COSC work and sending watches in for that certification. And then in addition to that, just for a baseline, it does further this idea of being more of a technical brand and really having a standard for a lot of their specifications. All their watches are going to have at least 100 meters. This one, of course, 5xing that. Just to unpack here, looking at this movement even further, again, 21,600 vibrations per hour, 3 Hertz, was feature hacking and hand winding, hacking stopping the second hand when you pull the crown to the farthest position, and a power reserve of 80 hours, with this watch running with great time out of the box within COSC parameters. It's not a COSC certified watch, but when we did test this out across 5 different positions, it was running like a top. All right, so now to unpack, looking at this Certina Super PH500M. So some pros, cons to begin. Let's start with some of the cons. Number one, I will mention, is going to be the thickness. Again, you're not going to feel it in wear because of that 14-sided central point of the case, but that is, when you're looking at that top to bottom measurement, going to be something that is still there. I would say it wears closer to that of a 13 or so millimeter case. I mean, you're adding quite a bit if you look at a side profile of this watch. Certina is a lesser known brand as well, so for some that are looking for the utmost brand equity, it is one of the best selling brands in the Nordic countries and in other parts of Europe, but here in the United States, where I am from, and different parts of the globe, it's not as well known and people are not nearly as familiar with it as other brands in this price segment. Also, the case is fully polished. Given all of the utilitarian approaches across the board with this watch, to have something that's polished, it is going to show more of those scratches, and for a watch that's just begging to be going through a ton of wear and tear, that is going to show more than maybe if it was brushed. Then shifting over to some of the pros, this is a watch that is going to deliver when it comes to specifications for the dollar amount. Number one, it is an ISO compliant dive watch, Swiss made, that 6425 standard. If you want to get lost in what the protocol and requirements are for obtaining that standard, definitely would recommend checking that out. There are many different things that this watch will have to withstand in order to get that level of certification and clearance. Rich history here that I think is very much overlooked. On the flip side, when you're talking about a lesser known brand, there's almost this hidden gem quality about Certina that I think could be interesting for those people, especially when a dial like this can bring someone in that also looks the part, but is very legible. The contrast in the dial with those markers, the black accents with the hands, very easy to read. Powermatic movement on the inside, 80 hours of power reserve, higher grade of that Powermatic movement to go along with it. And for this price point of around $1,000, you're actually under $1,000 at the time of recording this video. People ask all the time, what is the best dive watch for $1,000? There's plenty of considerations under $1,000 you can go for. Micro brands out there. Seiko is a powerhouse. Citizen is a powerhouse. Many of these Japanese brands. Tissot has some great stuff. But when you start to get around $1,000, I do believe some of the best representations of value come from Swiss brands, primarily in this segment within the Swatch Group. Mito and Certina. And if you're somebody that has not handled the Certina watch before, one thing I've really recognized as people start to get their hands on them is this is the brand that is a hidden gem. And as you get to handle these watches, you recognize for value for dollar, history that's going along with it, design DNA, there's a lot to like about these watches, making them some of maybe the most value packed of any dive watch under $1,000, and maybe even setting that exact standard for what a $1,000 dive watch should be. All right, guys, thank you again so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. That does help out the channel. Also, if you are in the market for this watch, it is available on TeddyBaldassarre.com. We're an authorized dealer for all the brands that we carry, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. And how we're able to fund all of our productions, not through the brands paying us to make the content, it is through selling watches on our site. So if you are in the market for a watch, we would absolutely love to have your business. I know you can buy a watch pretty much anywhere nowadays, but it allows us to keep doing what we're doing, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.